Hi, this is Tom Manning, the owner and founder of Tower Bridge Property Management. Today I want to talk about something that's becoming increasingly important in Sacramento, the Rental Housing Inspection Program, or RHIP, and more specifically, the constitutional issues surrounding it. Let me start by being very clear about where we stand. At Tower Bridge Property Management, we are absolutely committed to providing safe, clean, and habitable housing. That's not negotiable. We believe in maintaining high standards, responding to maintenance issues, and taking care of both our properties and our residents. Good housing isn't just good business, it's the right thing to do. But supporting safe housing does not mean we should ignore constitutional protections. And that's where concerns about RHIP come into play. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution protects people from unreasonable searches of their homes. And that protection applies just as strongly to rental housing as it does to owner-occupied homes. The Supreme Court made that clear in Camara versus Municipal Court in 1967, where it held that government housing inspections are considered searches. That means the government cannot simply enter an occupied unit because a program exists or because an inspection has been scheduled. A tenant has a right to refuse entry, and if that happens, the city must obtain an administrative warrant to proceed. Now here's where things get more concerning in practice. Programs like RHIP often rely on what is described as consent, but we have to ask whether that consent is truly voluntary. If property owners or tenants are told they must allow an inspection or face penalties, fines, or enforcement actions, then that starts to look less like consent and more like coercion. And under constitutional law, consent given under threat of penalty is not considered valid. This issue isn't just theoretical. We're now seeing courts across the country take a closer look at government programs that condition compliance on giving up constitutional rights. In fact, just recently, a New York appellate court struck down a housing law that required landlords to accept Section 8 vouchers. The court found that forcing landlords into that program effectively required them to submit to government inspections and oversight without meaningful ability to opt out, raising serious Fourth Amendment concerns. Now that case is not directly about rental inspection programs like RHIP, and it doesn't automatically determine how California courts would rule. But it does reinforce an important principle. Even well-intentioned housing laws cannot require people to give up constitutional protections as a condition of compliance. And that principle is highly relevant here. Another important issue is understanding who actually has the right to allow or deny entry. In an occupied rental unit, that right belongs to the tenant, not the landlord. A property owner cannot waive a tenant's Fourth Amendment rights, and we cannot force a tenant to open their door to a government inspector. That puts owners in a very difficult position. On one hand, we are expected to comply with the program. On the other, we are legally prohibited from overriding a tenant's constitutional protections. This creates a real conflict. Owners are expected to coordinate and facilitate inspections, but we don't have the authority to guarantee access. And when enforcement mechanisms are tied to that expectation, it raises serious legal concerns about whether the program is effectively penalizing people for respecting constitutional rights. Beyond the constitutional issues, there are also real-world impacts that need to be acknowledged. Programs like RHIP introduce additional administrative burdens, scheduling inspections, coordinating with tenants, handling reschedules, documenting compliance, and dealing with refusals. All of this takes time, labor, and resources. And those costs don't just disappear. They ultimately get built into the cost of operating housing, which contributes to higher rents and reduced affordability over time. So what we're left with is a program that, while well-intentioned, may push the limits of constitutional protections and create inefficiencies that increase the cost of housing without necessarily improving outcomes. At Tower Bridge, we believe there is a better approach. We support safe, well-maintained housing through responsible ownership, proactive management, and existing legal standards that already require properties to be kept in habitable condition. We believe enforcement should be focused on actual problem properties, not applied as a broad administrative burden on responsible owners. And most importantly, we believe that any government program must operate within the limits of the Constitution. That includes respecting a tenant's right to refuse a warrantless search and requiring the proper legal process when access is denied. This isn't about avoiding inspections. It's about ensuring that inspections are conducted lawfully, fairly, and in a way that does not create unnecessary costs or conflict with fundamental rights. If you're a property owner or real estate professional, it's important to understand both your responsibilities and your rights. You can maintain high standards, comply with lawful requirements, and at the same time, insist that any entry into an occupied unit follows the constitutional process, consent, or a warrant. That balance is not just good policy, it's the law, and it's something we believe is worth protecting. We understand that regulations like these can be complicated and are constantly evolving, especially here in Sacramento. Staying compliant while also protecting your rights isn't always straightforward. If you have questions about how these rules apply, or if you need help navigating inspections, tenant communication, or overall property management, we're here to help. At TowerBridge Property Management, we specialize in guiding owners through these challenges while maintaining high standards and minimizing risk. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're always happy to be a resource.